In this episode, I get to speak with Rachel Royale. She is a paralegal on a mission to change the world. Sound familiar? Throughout our conversation, we highlight some ways that non-lawyers can advocate towards real change. Listen in for more. Before we get into this episode, we would like to thank our Season 4 sponsor, Affirm Investigative Solutions, your go-to litigation support company. Without them, we would not be able to keep upgrading and integrating new concepts to this growing podcast. If you would like to take your support further, feel free to hit the support button on our Let's Talk Paralegal website so we can continue providing quality and empowering content for you and all our listeners.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. My name is Etta Rosa, and today I bring to you the lovely, the amazing Rachel Royal. How are you?
Great, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we met actually through a mutual person, and we've had probably 2 or 3 conversations, both virtually and electronically, because that's really how we communicate nowadays. And what I loved about you was your story, your why, and really what you're doing for the legal community and paralegals in particular. So you want to share a little bit about your story to the audience?
Sure. So I really kind of came into the paralegal field by accident. I decided when I was like 25 that I wanted to go back to school, and at the time I was would be kind of fitting with what I was doing. And then at the same time, my husband and I had to get custody of my nephew or his nephew a couple of years before. We had to go through a whole legal process, maxing out a credit card to get an attorney and all of that. And then at the time I was going back to school, we actually had to take care of his niece as well, who just wasn't in a great situation in her home life and just really needed someone to take care of her and get her into school. And so we didn't have any money at that time to get an attorney. And so I literally had to, we needed to be able to kind of relinquish custody to us. And it was just it was a humbling experience. Like I didn't even have a computer at the time. Like this was just how our life was. I had to go to the library, I had to research it, figure out what kind of templates to use and how to get her served and all of that. And I just didn't want to feel that helpless again. And so I really just decided that maybe doing something in the legal field was something that would be more suited to me, because I really enjoyed, even though it was a difficult situation, I enjoyed like being able to figure that out. And I wanted to figure out how to help other people with those kinds of situations. So literally 2 weeks before school started, I went and spoke to the director of the paralegal program at Carter Community College, which is where I got my degree. And she had to like talk with me and actually give me approval to switch my major that close to school starting, and met with her, and she just was like, okay, this is for you. And so I was just super excited to get started at that, and I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. And that's great. And that was only 5 years ago, so it's fine. I love it.
Yeah, it was about 7 years, almost 8 years ago at this point.
Awesome. Awesome. And I love that. I love that. Unfortunately and fortunately, right? A lot of things happen to us in the interim, and life happens to where
Yeah.
it changes our direction, and that's a perfect example. And that's something that we always talk about on the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. We have a lot of senior paralegals that have been in the industry for so long that just are lost and really don't know what else to do with their career, which is why they listen to the podcast in the first place, to kind of get new ideas and see what else they can do with the skills that they've been utilizing. Especially for, like me, I used it for 15 years, and then I'm like, I want to do something else. I want to help others. I want to be that person that I didn't have when I was lost in the train of the legal industry and so on and so forth, which is what led me to having this podcast and my company, but mostly the podcast. So it's great to hear that fellow legal professionals go through both personal and professional growth and really gear us to a different direction. So another thing, I guess, that geared you and triggered you was access to justice, right? You talked a lot about maxing out your credit card, trying to find the appropriate legal assistance, the appropriate attorney, all that good stuff, right? That takes a lot of research and somewhat of some sorts of knowledge, right? You have to do a lot of investigation and researching to, one, make sure you have the right legal assistance, right? Because not every attorney does everything, right? And you have a good one. You have one that's actually going to provide you with guidance and provide you with the legal consulting that you are searching for. So tell us a little bit about that. We already know where it originated from, but tell us what you're doing with that I guess that light of fire, correct?
So when I got into the paralegal field, my instructor, she had let me know about the North Carolina Bar Association, that they had a paralegal division I could join for free as a student. So I did that, and just really started to get involved in the division and in leadership, and really just pro bono was like my passion. That was just something I wanted to help other people. And, from that personal experience, I really liked doing stuff in family law. So I just did whatever I could to get involved. And by 2018, I joined the pro bono committee of that division. And then the chair of that division, or I'm sorry, of that committee, she had been in that role for quite a long time and was really kind of ready to relinquish it to somebody else. And so within just a few months of me starting that, she kind of turned the reins over to me. And then I also had a co-chair, SM Colonel Hodges, who is one of the co-founders of the North Carolina Justice for All project, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But she and I kind of worked together hand in hand to really just kind of grow the paralegal presence in pro bono throughout the state. And I feel like we were very successful at that. We were in that role for about 5 years together, and actually just stepped down from that due to other things that we wanted to kind of take on this year. But it was really a special way to kind of come into the legal community, and it's really helped a lot with networking and getting other paralegals involved and getting to know other people. So I really enjoyed doing that. And then that kind of morphed into just like volunteering with other organizations. And that's actually how I ended up in the current job that I'm in with the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission, because I actually volunteered for one of their programs, the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center, after Hurricane Florence. They did some FEMA appeals clinics and things like that. So I got to know them, and then, they had reached out to me at one point and said they were looking for a contract paralegal. And that was really what kind of led me to go from working, with the city of Wilmington at the city attorney's office to going out on my own and freelancing, because I was able to get that contract and then just kind of grow up from there.
Yeah, so there you go, guys. Perfect example about how networking and being, involved in your community and doing what you love. This is everything I preach. So thank you, Rachel, for, providing that example to my audience, because I am continuously talking about this on the podcast until my face is blue. So I appreciate that story. And this wasn't even planned. I didn't even know that. This is all recent. So, from when we last spoke,
Yes.
this is all recent. So I wasn't even planned, but thank you. I appreciate you seconding everything I just say on the podcast.
Yeah.
But and that brings us to our next point, right? Which are like takeaways and really involving yourself and immersing yourself in a community. I feel like and I talk about this all the time, when you're involving yourself in projects, in, things that are dear and near to you, or that directly correlate with your daily life, or whatever it is that, your mission in life or your purpose in life is. When you're continuously immersing yourself with those projects and you see the importance and you see the change that it's bringing, even it's just a trickle effect, right? Even if you help one person, that person will one day help the other, so on and so forth. We know that, right? The drop in the water, we hear it all the time. We read the memes and we see all the, short videos and all these inspirations, and we surround ourselves with affirmations, and we go through the YouTube, rabbit hole all the time trying to inspire ourselves. But we don't really practice it, right? We don't really go out there and search for associations, committees, project organizations, that are actually aligned with our passions. So any takeaway, any tips, and you can definitely talk about the organization that you were talking about earlier during this part of the session, but any takeaways that you may have for a paralegal, maybe hesitant or really doesn't know where to start when it comes to that? Because, we always think about it and it's kind of like making that list of goals, but never accomplishing them. It's the same, concept. So anything that maybe we can.
I would say definitely just getting involved in anything you can in your community, any types of paralegal or even attorney associations if they accept paralegals, and I know that plenty of them do. Just really using that networking and letting people get to know who you are as a person and what your passions are, because that is what will help kind of catapult you to the next step. And I feel like when you are giving back and you're helping others, that's going to come back to you as well. So I think it's just really important to find what it is that you are passionate about and kind of build your career around that, because when you're doing something that you really enjoy, then you'll put your best foot forward.
I love that. And you talk a lot about how paralegals can help fill the gap, right, of this access to justice. So, tell us a little bit more about that and your thoughts as far as that lane goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned my co-chair, SM Colonel Hodges, earlier, and so she was a co-founder of the North Carolina Justice for All project, along with Alicia Mitchell Mercer, who connected the two of us. And so they started that kind of at the end of 2020, really with the idea that there are several other states that are already kind of exploring this idea of using paralegals to fill that access to justice gap. Some of them being like Washington, Arizona, Utah. Those are the ones who kind of were the ones who are leading the charge in using paralegals in that way.
No, absolutely. And what she's talking about, for those of you that don't know, it really
Bring
depends.
that to North. So they just really wanted to bring that, filling the gap with paralegals to North Carolina. So they started at the end of 2020 in drafting a proposal that they had planned to submit to the Supreme Court and the state bar. And then early in 2021, I had found out that they were doing this and just told them if there was anything I could do to help, to let me know. And so that was when I and two other of our colleagues, Shawana Almendarez and Morag Pulaski, started kind of helping, and we just kind of helped with, just reviewing the proposal and giving any kind of input based on our personal experience and our subject matter experience and things like that. So altogether, we ended up submitting that in early 2021 to the State Bar and the Supreme Court of North Carolina. And, our Supreme Court justice had responded and said, let's go through the State Bar's process. At the time, they were doing a regulatory subcommittee to study regulatory change. And then my colleagues, Alicia Mitchell Mercer and SM Colonel Hodges, were actually appointed to that committee. So they actually had, a seat at the table to kind of talk about that with the other state bar members. And, we went through that process, and nothing really happened as far as like they didn't kind of go forward with any sort of action. But we really still felt strongly based on the research that, the Alicia was doing and that we were all kind of doing, and just really decided that we wanted to move forward with that. And so Alicia actually drafted a legislative proposal and policy analysis that she submitted to the legislature early this year. And we've just continued kind of going around and talking to different schools and other people kind of like yourself, anybody who really wants to listen about access to justice and how paralegals can get involved, and really just listening to the research that's coming out of other states as well as our own. Because we did have the organization that I work for had partnered with UNC Greensboro and the Equal Justice Alliance in 2021 to put out the first civil legal needs assessment in over 20 states. And that was really kind of in line with the research that we were finding from other states about what kind of issues people here in North Carolina are dealing with, and the woefully underwhelming amount of legal services that they're actually getting from organizations like Legal Aid or any other nonprofit in the state. There's just not enough. There's not enough funds to go around. There's not enough people to go around who are licensed to be able to help these people, especially in the remote areas. Because there's also the state bar is doing a study on legal deserts and just showing that there's some counties in the state, and we have 100 counties in our state, and I think 10 of them have less than 10 attorneys per county. So that's just not enough attorneys to help the people, especially when you think about conflict checks and things like that. Like, there's just not enough attorneys to go around for the number of people who need legal help.
Wow, I didn't know that. So thank you. Wow, 10 attorneys. And the thing is that we all have different types of legal issues, right? So even with those 10 attorneys, using that example, may not cover all of the legal basis that, society has in legal matters. So, specializing, I know immigration's a big talk of the town now, especially with this new movement of limited licensing and access to justice. And also family law, right? So divorce courts and what we call simple, right? Something straightforward, pretty much document heavy and standardized throughout the nation with one or two differences depending on what state in the United. We're talking about, just FYI guys, because I know there's a lot of listeners listening from London and Canada. This discussion is solely based on the United States. I know in India there is a version of what we're speaking about, which is called the barefoot paralegal. I know in Canada, Ontario, this has already happened, right? Which is what we're basing our models on. I know most of the research and everything is coming from that type of model, showing that it does work, and this is the result of it, and that it has to be modified just like anything else in life. So just for this discussion today, we're talking about the United States of America, and we're primarily talking about the states that have not already passed it, right? So, within Washington, Colorado, Arizona, yeah. So I live in Florida. I have no expectations of this happening anytime soon, just because our government, regardless of what party you're at, they're very black and white. Doesn't matter. Like, there's like all the, but this is the one issue that the Florida bar has really been putting their foot down on all ends, which is, you're an attorney, legal advice. You're not, you just don't. So very, very controversial here, especially for us paralegals. We don't get paid that much. So this would have been a great avenue for us to, get more income as a paralegal. Granted that we do most of the work anyway, but it is what it is. We gotta want this. But we'll try again. We'll try again. I feel like once 25 of the states pass, I think Florida will be like, all right, fine.
Yeah. It's eventually going to happen. We just have to keep pushing for it.
Yeah. So advocacy is a big thing in our company as well. Be the voice of those that don't have one. And so, that's what intrigued me about you and about the organization and what North Carolina is doing. I know Maryland is trying to do it as well, since Washington has already. Washington State, we're talking about Washington State? Yes. Washington State, not Washington DC. So another correction there, just for everyone that's probably not familiar with the topic that we're talking about, which is why you're listening to it most likely. So there's a lot of, in short, just to kind of summarize our conversation for today, what we're talking about is access to justice. There is a lot of, especially in criminal, immigration, and family law. I believe, according to my personal research as well, those are the three most needed, right? Because it usually tends to be with lower income communities. Personal injury, I know, is a big deal here in the state of Florida, and mostly everywhere that utilizes mobile mobility vehicles and transportation in general. So there's a lot of areas for growth. There's a lot of forward movements where all parties are combining, regardless of your race, ethnicity, we all can finally find common ground on one subject to move the industry forward and to hopefully relieve that gap, right? Because that's really what we're trying to attempt. We're trying to be those community advocates that we've signed up to be, right? As legal professionals, regardless of where you stand in the legal industry. We're trying to be the voice to the community, and we're trying to give them and provide a solution with, because they're lawyers, with facts, with research, with proof, with allegations, with everything, to help them make the decision that hopefully will come into our favor one day. So I wish you the best of luck. And I hope that it goes through, because the more states that, pass it, the better it is for me. So I'm great for that. And for everybody else in the community and the legal industry in general. I think some people don't see it that way. Some people might be intimidated, especially attorneys themselves. Hey, I went to law school. This is the other end, right? So I went to law school. I paid all this money. I'm still paying off my student loans. And here we are, with these paralegals that have a certain amount of, education, able to do almost the same thing I am. And how is that fair? But the thing is, the reality is that if you are going into these limited licensings, you have to get additional education, certifications. Like, it doesn't matter if you're certified paralegal. It doesn't matter if you already have a paralegal studies degree. That is very outdated to this new topic. So just like any new laws that pass, we're learning, right? We're learning. We'll have case law hopefully one day. We'll have common law. We'll have, regulations and procedures and all that good stuff tied into it to hopefully one day support the mission to relieve the gap and provide more people that don't have it access to the justice. Any last words that you want to say, Rachel? Any empowering speech or, anything that you want to let the audience know? Hey, by the way,
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, you have a constitutional right to petition your government for redress of grievances. So just remember, like, whenever you're feeling, if you see that there's a problem and you see that it's something that could potentially be a constitutional issue or any other type of issue, it's important to remember that you have that right just as much as anybody else. And just because you're in the legal field and you're dealing with attorneys on a daily basis, don't let that intimidate you. Like, it is very intimidating to take this on as somebody who's not an attorney, just like everybody in our North Carolina Justice for All group is not an attorney. So I think that that's kind of what does set us apart a little bit from the other groups in the nation who have been doing this, is that they all have some sort of judge or attorney or somebody that's on their side and kind of champion this. And that's not something that we've had just yet. We definitely have people from other states who are definitely on our side, but not really a whole lot of people in our state yet who are really willing to step up and say, this is something that really needs to happen. So again, just find what your why is, find out what you're passionate about, and make sure that you make that a part of your everyday work.
Oh, I couldn't have said it. Look, I got chills. You can't see it because I have long sleeves today, but oh my goodness, that was amazing. Thank you, Rachel, for what you do, for what you're doing for the legal industry, but in particular for the future of the paralegal role. It's so in line with everything I talk about. So this is not like an outer space topic. Please, by no means, if you are a new listener, because I know we're getting an influx of new listeners, definitely listen to our prior episodes so that you can see kind of, where this aligns with the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. Thank you so much, Rachel, for taking your time and for battling the internet issues. Just FYI, during the time of the recording, Comcast has had a nationwide outage, of course, on the one day that I have multiple podcast recordings. But, just so y'all know, we're going to edit this and we're going to make it look pretty, and it's probably going to come out perfect. But, little side note for the audience out there, please don't kill us. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Until
Thank you.
justice
Thanks
is
for having
served.
me. Thanks.
Bye.